We are now live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our September meeting, which is being held partly in person and partly by Zoom. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And our first motion, Jeanette.
Moved by Councillor Rebel, seconded by Councillor Martin. Resolved that Council resolve itself into Committee of the Whole closed session as authorized under Section 239 of the Municipal Act to consider adoption of closed minutes of meeting held July 15th, 2020, and labor relations or employee negotiations as it relates to negotiations with OPSU Local 462.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Since I can't see everyone, is there anyone voting against the motion? Anyone voting no? Hearing none, the motion's carried. So we'll now move into closed session and we will return to open session at 9:30.
How you spend it is up to your council, but don't come and ask us.
I thought that money was population.
Yeah, it is, but it isn't stipulated how your council spends.
Hey, Francis?
I'm not going to ask you.
Ron, we missed you.
Yeah, I never got brought back into the meeting.
You can apply, but.
So, Councillor Higgins, did you receive my email? You actually had to dial in via teleconference.
But it's going to, that's going to cover it.
Oh, okay, I missed that part of it, Jeanette.
Yeah, sorry. Only because we can't do the two Zooms and we can't shut down the Zoom
Okay.
and public back out. But I will note in the minutes that you were physically not present, but that your comments were noted.
Okay.
We actually did it on purpose.
Thanks.
Oh, we got to vote on it.
Last time we were here, we weren't allowed to have coffee, so I brought my own.
You're holding up.
That's a hold up.
My mask. Hold up, yeah.
Okay.
So we're putting the streets back together again a little bit on Charlotte Lake?
Yep, come along with us.
You still got a couple of
Friday.
Let's get through down there, you know.
You were up there last night? We were two the other morning. There was some frost at the golf course. I see you.
Oh, that's any project.
I don't
you've
think
got.
we've seen below 10 yet, but we got water all around us.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get the opposite in
Fran?
spring. You guys warm up and we're still freezing.
It would be nice to see the final product.
Yeah.
Yes, Jeanette,
That's me calling you on your cell phone. Are you able to answer it?
I can, yes.
Oh,
I figured
okay.
just a telemarketer.
I'm going to call you back because it went to voicemail.
Okay,
Do you want her to speak while she's on that microphone though?
Oh, yeah.
it's okay. I muted.
Bill, what are those nests in the trees now?
Those are tent cabins.
They usually springs right there.
Good. But what I've been doing is for people who are concerned about it is I go and I just remove the whole nest and burn it. But they're mostly on up our way there. You'll find mostly on fruit trees.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Apple, cherry.
It's just the cities where we're having trouble.
There was one property I went on, right in Sharp Lake, right beside the hotel. This side.
And the young kids got to go to university, first time away from home.
We do our heads out. Removal.
You thought I was a telemarketer.
We just had a massive, I had a dump truck. That was, and when I got those all down, she had those flowering grass trees.
Yes.
And they were just, it was massive with them. And they actually were killing the tree.
Yes.
So I took them all down. I had the back of my dump truck.
I just find it. That's it, my hand.
I took them out of my own property, out in the middle of an old abandoned gravel pit. Dumped them out.
This is pretty cool.
I mean, the ability of them, these eggs, massive. And I thought the 10 were going down a little bit, but drove down 38 the other day. And I started noticing nests right along 38. And just out the farmhouse, you know, where York Road is.
Yes.
Eggs, they're everywhere.
We came through a golden carpet this morning. Pebbles infested through the park.
Is that right?
Yeah, all the trees, or many, those specific species, they've covered all the trees.
Really? Yeah. But those are we had a huge infestation of gypsy moth this spring.
Yes,
And forest caterpillars are two different types of those.
yes,
And they first, when we're on the white oak tree,
yes.
the white oak tree just decimated, no leaves left. Now, thank God we got a pile of rain after they went through the metamorphosis, whatever you want to call it. The trees were able to grow and reestablish the leaves. But that's only because it was so wet that there was lots of moisture.
Mine were defoliated fairly well, but they didn't seem to grow many new leaves. There's some trees that are under stress, but they didn't seem to grow a whole lot of new leaves.
Well, I don't know how much rain you got down your way. We got rain. We've had rain 2-3 days every week, all summer. And the rain basically hit after the infestation was done, went through the cycle. And our white oak trees, I have a white oak tree like this here in my mailbox, and it's completely re-radiated. And our neighbor down the road has about 4 or 5 big ones. And they're completely re-approved. But now,
I'm not a great speller.
what happened 10, 15 years ago, when the gypsy moths went through, they stripped the oak trees. They were mainly on red oak. And then the very next year, we had a drought. And it killed the trees. I had one spot on my own land, one piece of land that there's probably, there was about 75 oak trees were dead. I'm finding oak right now, they're died. They haven't regrown any leaves. Not that he did, it's going to be bare. So when I harvest them, you can, when an oak tree dies, you get worms. The worms will go all the way through it. And what I'm finding is a lot of those, I have to put those trees into firewood because you can't send the log, the bark be coming off. And they're just, I'm selling them for firewood, but I do a lot better if I can sell them for oak.
Sure.
Red oak.
All the teachers.
But that's the way it is.
All the people.
There's a tremendous amount of downfall in the woods. A lot of exposed the hickory trees up there. I've already taken smooth bark hickory, they call it. Not you down here, you have shagbark hickory, and we have smooth bark hickory. And they've taken an awful. There's a pile of those. I have those like this in the woods that are stone dead, bark falling off.
Yes.
Now, mind you, the hickory are producing a fantastic nut production this year, but the red oaks aren't. The hickory nuts are all over the woods. But the deer, I don't think deer eat those. They will eat the oak nuts.
They eat ones, yeah.
Anybody have been to the MTO Drive Center lately?
The what?
The what?
Oh,
The drive center. I have to turn in my medical report, and I'm wondering if they have a drop box there.
I went to to do my medical and they accepted it.
Yeah, but did you have to go in and take a number and wait in line to walk up to the counter?
I went in, but there was nobody. The girl said, it's just a minute. And I went in and she took it and that was the end of it.
Yeah, that's all you have to do, turn it in, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to go down there. The last time I was there, I went for my 5-year test. 2 hours. So I just want to throw an envelope. Next
Put some
time
money in it, maybe it'll work.
The next time I have to go for my drive test, I'm going to revert to G license, I'll be 75. So
And then the
Yeah, I thought you
actual,
took from here to move it around. I talked to Brianna about
we
those
tried.
questions. He's going to
so I
resend
sent
them.
the email.
I'll probably drive what I
She
was.
said she sent like a big file and we had to do something special.
Oh, okay, that's the problem right there then.
And I,
So these.
You're special.
No, we had to do something
well, we had
special.
to
And
click
when
on
the,
the, and I-
Ontario East Municipal
I must
Conference
have clicked on
changed
it.
its dates,
I tried a couple, and I got one from the township too, and I tried it damn way.
we tried to
Yeah,
change the dates of the budget meetings,
So,
because Ontario.
This is good Sunday morning
she's gonna
reading.
help us.
5 o'clock in the morning, I wake up Sunday morning.
I thought you were
Trying to go through all this stuff.
So I sent out the email to council saying,
Not
are you
sounding
available
positive.
here?
Yep, I hear you.
But not enough
Concentrate.
people are available, so the majority of them were not
It's my
available.
way of doing it.
So that's why we didn't change it.
Yeah, I just looked at my calendar because we're leaving. Yeah, we're leaving back for.
Well, that's the problem. I can't do everything on my phone now. It's easier than.
Is everyone almost ready to get back to business?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This thing have to be turned back on.
Okay, Jeanette, do we have a motion coming out of closed session?
Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Higgs, resolved that the council rise from the committee of the whole closed session, that procedural bylaw 2013-20 be waived, and that the warden report.
Any questions or comments on the motion? Is there anyone voting no to the motion? Motion's carried. And just the report coming out is that we're going to be signing an agreement with OPSU. So
There's a motion for that, Warden Smith. That's moved
Okay.
by Councillor Higgins, seconded by Deputy Warden Vanderwall. Resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac accept the Human Resources ratification of the collective agreement between Ontario Public Service Employees Union, OPSU, and its Local 462, and the Corporation of the County of Frontenac report for information. And further, that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute a 2-year collective agreement effective January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2020, with Local 462 of the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, OPSU, Local 462, which represents the county's paramedics.
any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, is there anyone voting no to the motion? Hearing no votes, motion's carried. Now we are at our public meeting portion, and I'd like to welcome everyone. County Council is conducting this public meeting to permit citizens, businesses, and other Frontenac stakeholders to address council to make representation on the 2021 budget. Citizen input and customer satisfaction plays a key role in the county's budget process, and citizen input is welcome throughout the budget process, including but not limited to strategic planning, business planning, budget development, and service level changes. Sorry about that. The procedure for the public meeting will be as follows. I will invite those who pre-registered with the clerk for inclusion on today's agenda to come and speak first. Should there be any other persons wishing to make comments or to ask questions about the budget, they will be given an opportunity to address council, and Megan will go through the process of how to go about that with the technology. Please be aware that anyone who wishes to address council should direct their comments and questions through the warden. Megan, would you like to give us a synopsis of how people can raise their hand?
How do I get?
For sure. Thank you very much, Warden. So when the meeting is open to members of the public to provide comment on the agenda, we will ask that everyone connecting via Zoom uses the raise hand feature, which is located at the bottom of the screen if you're connecting via a laptop, or sometimes at the top of the screen if you are connecting via a tablet. If you are joining us by phone this morning, we will ask that you hit or dial *9, and that is the equivalent of raising your hand over the phone. Once I see that a member of the public has raised their hand, Madam Chair, I will alert you to this, and then at your discretion, I will unmute the microphone. So members of the public, please wait a few seconds after I unmute your microphone before speaking to ensure that we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that will allow everyone to have a say. And our first presenter is Louise Moody and Gail Young.
Hold on, Fran, just a second. Councillor Doyle has his hand up.
Okay, Councillor Doyle.
First question, how do you want us to raise our hands here? You can't see us, I gather.
Well, I think what's going to happen is after we get through the public meeting and the first portion, Deputy Mayor Vanderwall will take over so he can look after the votes.
Okay, that's good. The other thing I just want to point out that maybe we want to correct in this agenda, it does say that's to get consideration for the 2020 budget. I know what we mean is 2021, but maybe for the record, we change that.
Okay.
So no.
So it is 2021 budget. Okay, do we have Louise and Gail with us?
Madam Chair, I have Louise on the line. I will proceed to unmute her microphone, and Louise, I will bring up your presentation.
Good morning, Louise.
Oh, it might take 1 second. Sorry, my mouse is sticking.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. I'll just wait for the presentation.
Okay. Is Gail with you?
Unfortunately, Gail's on a leave at the moment, so I am solo. I have Catherine Tizick, who runs our seniors program, with me in case some specific questions come up regarding that.
Okay, fine. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to make this budget presentation today. FTS connects people of all ages to a wide variety of services, empowering them to live rural life to its fullest. Next slide. We are here to request $48,000 in funding for 2021 to support our county-wide transportation service. Next slide. We have been providing a user-paid volunteer transportation service to any resident 7 days a week throughout the county since 2010. Our services allow seniors to age at home. They are able to attend appointments, go shopping, and participate in social events. Our services ensure that rural residents can get to medical appointments and hospital treatments such as dialysis 3 times a week and daily chemotherapy. Our services support children and youth to access the services they need, including daycare, school, and community programs. Next slide. 2020 has been a challenging year. No one could have anticipated a global pandemic and our communities closing down. In response to the shutdown, FTS has been assisting residents to access transportation they need to get to services during the pandemic. Some had no vehicle, some were self-isolating, some had been relying on friends and neighbors who are no longer providing transportation. Some were vulnerable due to illness and choosing not to leave home. Volunteer drivers have continued throughout the pandemic to take seniors and residents to essential medical rides. In addition to regular rides, we have responded by delivering takeout, groceries, prescriptions, and food to residents who could not get out of their homes. Next slide. In March, local businesses asked if we could assist them to support their customers. We also heard from residents who had not required services before. For example, snowbirds returning to Canada requiring to self-isolate, vulnerable seniors choosing not to come out of their home. To respond to the need, we applied for funding from the Ontario Community Support Association, the United Way, KFLNA, and the Community Foundation of Kingston area to help cover the costs of these deliveries. We are not charging clients for this service or using county funds. We have continued to drive our third-party clients at regular cost to them throughout the pandemic. Next slide. So this is a pictorial of what pre and post COVID looks like. There's a 59% decrease in overall rides. There was a 54% decrease in drives to the hospital, 100% decrease in rides for children and youth going to programs and for any miscellaneous rides. So it's quite a dramatic change, and I think on a probably countywide, provincial, and national level, it exemplifies many services. Next slide. So between January 1st and June 30th, we have provided 3,492 rides. We gave rides to 129 unique individuals, and just about 40% were seniors. The average number of rides per client per month is 4.5. That obviously varies just a lot. If someone's in dialysis or doing chemotherapy, they would be a lot, and some are really once a month, but that's the average. And the chart kind of shows you the different areas that we provide rides. And obviously, since it ended in June, a majority of these were done in January to March. Next slide. So 2 years ago, we completed a business model. We looked at various ways to cover our costs while delivering accessible transportation to rural residents who didn't have private transportation. This chart illustrates our model. We have a small portion of county funds, which gives us the infrastructure to dispatch rides. We provide rides to seniors, individuals, children and youth, often paid by third parties, which provide a majority of our revenue. Third-party rides include rides for our clients receiving ODSP and OW, and for organizations who need transportation for their clients. For example, Tri-Board, Childcare, Veterans Affairs. We charge 60 cents a kilometer. For those without funds to cover the actual cost of a ride, we subsidize these rides. Seniors pay only 30 cents per kilometer. For a person who needs dialysis 3 times a week in either Kingston or Smith Falls, the cost is further subsidized. So typically our client fees are what we roll back into being able to provide subsidy to the rides. And Gail very carefully manages kind of the revenue and the need and tries to support those who wouldn't get a ride without our help support. Next slide. So this is just an example of where our expenses go. So 26% of our budget is going towards staff salaries. We have 2 staff. We have Nikki and Gail. Gail helps with the administration and does dispatch, and Nikki does dispatch. They're both part-time. 14% is overhead, which is the computers, the phone, the program for us to operate, the building, and any for the audit, any of those other additional expenses. And then driver disbursement is 60%. So that's where the funding goes. Next slide. So for the 2021, we are requesting $48,000 from the County of Frontenac to assist us in covering the staff salaries, the allocation of overhead, and advertising. So funding from Frontenac County will be used to help cover the costs to ensure that Frontenac Transportation Service is staffed and prepared to dispatch rides every day of the week. So our business model does help cover a majority of our costs, but we do, as a not-for-profit, really need to ensure that we can make solid employment and keep our doors open. So if for some reason there was a sudden decrease and we weren't able to do drives, we need the ability to be able to continue this service without the income. And when we have a good year and we're able to generate revenue, we can offset those costs. Next slide. So we've identified some key performance indicators, and we'd be happy to work with the county if there were other ones that they wanted. We are completing a quarterly report, and some of these numbers are in it. Some of them we keep internally, but we feel they are good indicators of the work that we're doing. So one is the number of volunteer drivers, which is the backbone of the system. The number of unique individuals served. We don't want to just serve 5 people. We want to make sure that we're serving a range of people from a range of different areas throughout the county. We want to know the number of seniors served, both for our county funding and also because we're delivering a service for the local integrated health network. The percentage of revenue from third-party rides and client fees, and that will just help us know that we're meeting our business plan. If we start to find that the percentage of revenue isn't able to cover it, Our business plan did look at different models to increase fees to help us manage that. So we would return to that. The number of dispatch calls received. It's easy to think that you could do this on a part-time job, but we receive calls 7 days a week. We have staff on call on the weekends to manage if somebody has to cancel a ride or someone suddenly needs an emergency ride. And our office is open from 8:30 to 4 every day. And then just the number of rides dispatched. We don't always fulfill all our rides. Sometimes people get sick and can't do it. Sometimes appointments are canceled, but we do feel that the work to just dispatch the ride is an important indicator of the work that we do. Next slide. So for people without their own transportation, Frontenac Transportation is a vital link to their community, both for their health and for their well-being. A client told us, it means I get to go where I need to go and live where I want to live. We often hear people say that without our rides, they would have to move to the city where public transportation is available. So we feel pretty strongly, and we hear from our clients that we need to do whatever we can to not only have a volunteer ready to drive, that we have an affordable ride that, that they can take. Next slide. A volunteer driver told us why they drive for FTS. And they said, it is so rewarding knowing that I'm helping people in my community. I want to give back. There have been people that have helped me through my life, and now it's my turn to help others. And I think you can appreciate how committed and dedicated they are by having continued to drive throughout the pandemic. They have got PPE, they are keeping their cars sanitized, they have wipes they use, but they're pretty committed. They want to make sure that the people that they've got to know who are their clients and their friends sometimes are still getting the rides and the services that they need. And that dedication is to be definitely applauded this year. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come here today. We are continue to commit to the seamless transportation system to all residents of the county, and your support makes it possible for us. So thank you for considering our request for 2021. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Louise. Any questions or comments?
Councillor McDonald has a question.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Louise, you make in your presentation that you've appealed to several other funding sources. I'm just wondering how successful that was. And before you answer, I just wanted to say from a personal perspective that I completely support this program, because if there's any program that's very important in the area that I represent, it's been the rural transportation system. So many folks really need that system. So when it comes to a vote at budget time, I'll certainly be supporting them, but I'd like to know how successful you were in your other appeals. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your question. So actually, we were amazingly successful. The first grant we applied for was from the OCSA, which is a seniors association. And we asked for two pieces. One, for some funding to help subsidize rides, because we knew that more people needed rides, and to deliver food to people. So it helped cover the cost of deliveries. We also were able to ask for funding to cover the additional cost for our Meals on Wheels program. So we increased our Meals on Wheels from 2 days a week to 3 days. And we increased our rides, our routes from 2 routes. And 1 route was in North Frontenac, and we only did it once a week. And since the pandemic, we've been doing 4 routes in North and Central Frontenac 3 times a week. So the first funding was very supportive. We then applied for additional funding through the United Way, and again, rides were covered, and also deliveries. And we were able to make a second application to the OCSA, and that's just ended. And again, we were able to use it for grocery delivery and Meals on Wheels. And our most recent one now that we have will go until next. Sorry, I'm consulting with Catherine.
I think it's March 31st.
We'll go till March 31st. And again, it's for rides and deliveries, and for the extra Meals on Wheels delivery. So all of our applications, although one was slightly reduced, have been supported by the groups we've applied to. Thank you.
Okay, Ron Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Louise, thanks for the presentation. Great job you did last year. My question is, With COVID and the unlikelihood that the snowbirds will be heading back south this year, have you taken that into consideration for your budget planning?
Yes, I think a majority of the snowbirds do have their own transportation and can drive. But if we go to a second shutdown and people can't leave their home or need deliveries, we certainly will accommodate them. If somebody needs to go away, if they have a vacation property they need to close or they're not going to and they need to quarantine, we're certainly there to be able to support them. Typically, they become a ride that we not make money on, but there's always an offset. So we could accommodate that increase in rides. We are currently recruiting more drivers. We've just brought 2 more on today. And we did ask our over 70 drivers not to drive during the pandemic, and they are joining us again. So both from accommodating the demand, but also be able to meet that need with the drivers. I think we've looked at both of those.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question, Deputy Warden Van Wall. My biggest
Go ahead,
concern, with the rural transportation is this. I'm not saying I don't support it, but I thought when this was put in, it is to subsidize or provide for needy or vulnerable seniors who want to stay in their home. And that's not what you're providing there. And so that is my biggest concern. If that's what the County of Frontenac is paying for, I don't have a problem with that. But you are basically running a lot different program, and this funding is covering a portion of that, and that's my biggest concern.
So we are providing rides to seniors, and no senior is left behind, and they are our priority service. Since its inception, we have always been riding kids to school and helping kids get to daycare. I don't know how much at that point, how I don't believe it was funded by the county at that time. I think it was funded by a tax benefit that was used to help cover transportation. So our service has maintained what we've done, but I understand that the county was funding seniors and they continue to be a priority. We just can't leave everyone else behind. So that's why our business model is so important, and for hopefully you can see it, that we are generating revenue to cover those other rides. We are using, where possible, income generated from those other rides to not only subsidize the seniors' rides, but also to subsidize low-income residents. We also do receive about $75,000 from our local integrated health network through our CSS funding for transportation. So up in the north, it hasn't been as a significant gap in funding as much as children and youth that no one's been funding. So hopefully we're meeting your need. I hope you won't hear from a senior whose needs aren't being met. But at the same time, we're also ensuring vulnerable clients throughout the county. And that includes some clients that live in South Frontenac that need our transportation either because of a physical impairment or another reason that they don't have a car to be able to get around. Some of them are actually doing business, so we're supporting the local economy to do that. So we do have a broader lens, but we hope you understand your funding is supporting seniors, and we understand that's your priority.
Ron Higgins?
Yeah, just to respond to that, we had that concern for the last couple of years, and we had requested both the transportation providers put in some metrics so that we could track that. And I've been watching the metrics that they both providing, and I feel comfortable that the funding that the county's providing is going towards where we want it to based on the information I'm seeing on the metrics. So thanks for the metrics, by the way, Louise.
Thank you. We all need those to be able to understand the service. So it's a great opportunity to brag about what we're doing for us. We're quite pleased to send them in. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to our next presenter, which is David Townsend from Southern Frontenac Community Services.
Madam Chair, I'm going to mute Louise now.
Okay.
And then, David, your microphone is now unmuted, and I'm bringing up your presentation.
Welcome, David.
Thank you, Warden. Nice to see you again. I appreciate being online with you.
Okay.
I do also, like Louise, have a presentation to support rural transportation. Our geography is more South Frontenac, and the demand here is weird right now. So Megan, if you could move the first slide. I did go back to the old strategic plan. I have picked up the new one, and understand that we're still focusing here on seniors, which was the original intent of the funding transportation. I've tied it into the strategic plan, but it's not one of the top priorities in the plan anymore. So please excuse this slide. It's a bit dated. Next slide. So when you last funded us for transportation, we agreed to provide 5,720 rides to more than 150 seniors, that we would be administering seniors rides from our offices here, supporting South Frontenac and rural Kingston, and that we would provide county with quarterly reports and just numbers so that, as Mayor Higgins sort of said, you can keep track of what we're doing. So we feel we've done that. Megan? So here are our stats for the year ending March 31st, knowing that we shut down on March the 16th. So we exceeded the number of rides provided. We were under our number of seniors served by 12. The total kilometers driven in South Frontenac, the client fees and the volunteer driver costs. What I don't have in a number for you is what the actual staffing costs were for this program, because we're also funded by the Southeast Limb for transportation, and I did not figure out how to divide it up accurately for you. I could certainly work with Kelly if you wanted us to. Next slide. So here's where the pandemic has really hit us. From April 1st through to August 31st, we've dropped from 28 drivers to 15. We've gone from 138 seniors down to 34. So the rest are not going anywhere. They don't want to leave their homes. 392 drives, but these don't include the Meals on Wheels, which have more than doubled here in the South. Like Louise in the North, we're now looking at a third day for Meals on Wheels delivery. So the client fees versus driver costs, but the big thing is that we have kept all the staff on payroll as we try to respond to any need that comes through during this pandemic. We did look at grocery delivery. I think we've made 3 grocery deliveries because the 2 food lands here in the South and Glen Burnie Grocery are all doing their own. Glen Burnie's also partnering with Heart to Home. So we have backed away from doing grocery delivery because there's other people providing it. Next slide, please. So our budget request for 2021 is we're still looking for support from the county for the 48,000 rides. The goal from this year is there. But I honestly have no idea how to give you statistical projections for 2021 at this point. We are, like Louise, recruiting drivers. We only have 3 right now that are doing seniors rides. We do have another 4 or 5 that we're interviewing. PPE is a huge issue for a lot of these drivers because the public health guidelines state that a driver has to spray down and sanitize their car after every ride. Some of them are looking at us going, but that's going to affect the upholstery of the car. So we're working with them to provide alternatives through PPE that they can afford to continue to drive seniors and have a safe environment for them. What we're really looking for is help to ensure the financial sustainability of our transportation model as we all recover. We don't know what the second wave is going to do, but we do know that we need to be here to respond to any request for a ride in the South, especially as the weather gets cold and people are locking up once again. Next slide, please. So our plans for 2021 is to rebuild the volunteer base. Okay, in Q1, we had 57 drivers. At the end of June, we were down to 11, 8 of whom were doing just Meals on Wheels, and 3 of them were doing seniors rides. And that is rebounding again. We need to rebuild our seniors' confidence in safe volunteer drives to medical and hospital appointments. We need a gradual return to health support programs here at Southern Frontenac Community Services. So we have safely reopened our adult day program. We have safely reopened our Grace Social Activity Center. Our congregate dining is on hold because we don't think that the congregate setting is the best position for seniors to be coming to yet. But we will continue to expand our Meals on Wheels, both the frozen and hot, and we'll respond to any grocery shopping call that we get. What we're really looking for is to ensure the financial sustainability of Southern Frontenac Community Services. I was on a call with the United Way yesterday with their Social Services Recovery Task Group, and the United Way is well aware and predicting that several social service agencies are not going to make it through a second wave. And I'm hoping that we won't be one of them. Financially, we had our AGM last week and we are in very good financial state, but heaven only knows what the future is going to bring for us. Megan? And that, I just want to thank all of you for continuing to support all of us in the county, whether it's South Central, North, or the islands. It's become a new world where if we try to work independently, we're all going to fail. But when we can work together, we stand a chance to really rebuild our community and our vitality. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments for David? Somebody's hands up. Jerry?
For Doyle.
Oh, sorry, Dennis.
Yes, David and Louise, I want to let you know that the islands always support this program, and we just wish we could get one going in our community. But the actual amount, we will discuss a budget, but in concept, I do support the program and congratulate you on providing the excellent service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Ron Higgins?
This is more of a comment and a question for our CAO than it is for David. Listening to both presentations, there's some unpredictability about the future as far as funding goes. And the funding being requested is basically the same as last year. I was wondering if staff could maybe work with both of these organizations to try and pinpoint a financial number that they would expect that they need to continue the services into next year, and that we submit if there's extra monies required for transportation services, that we apply for additional funding from Minister Clark as he requested at the end of October. So this could be an opportunity to get some extra money to help out both our social service programs going into next year due to COVID. And I was wondering if Kelly would like to comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. I'd remind council that both parties are asking for $48,000, which is $96,000. For 2020, we took that money out of reserve. So if this goes back in, it'll be a direct tax hit to Frontenac taxpayers. With respect to funding from the province has provided funding for transportation. I've asked the question of the province whether there'd be grants available for programs like this, and their answer is no, it's for traditional transit. But there will be another round of funding related to COVID that we may be able to apply for if we can make the proper business case. So bad news, good news, perhaps. How's that?
So certainly something that can be worked on. Sorry, go ahead, Ron.
So maybe we could ask about David and Louise to try and pinpoint some forecasted number that we know about if we go through another application process.
Okay. Okay, so we'll leave that with Kelly and the two executive directors.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, David. And Louise, is there anyone waiting in the wings, Megan?
There are a few other members of the public on the line, so I would state if any of the members of the public would like to speak as part of the public meeting, if you could use the raise hand feature, which is located at the bottom of the screen, or if you're calling in by dialing *9. Madam Chair, I am not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, all right. That concludes our public portion of the meeting then. And I would say that all the budget requests and comments will come forward during budget deliberations that council is having October 2021 and possibly 22nd of October for either inclusion or exclusion from the 2021 budget. So we will be getting back to folks after that date once the budget is set. So with that, we will return to our regular meeting as soon as I can get the agenda up here. And we need a motion. Oh no, is there any addendums?
There is no addendum, Madam Warden.
Okay, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda by any member of council?
There are no
Hearing
hands
none.
raised, Madam Warden.
Okay, thank you. Adoption of the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Doyle, seconded by Councillor Higgins. Resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting held July 15th, 2020 be adopted.
Any discussion? Is there anyone voting no? Hearing none, motion's carried. No deputations or presentations. We have a proclamation.
Moved. So for the Canadian Library Month of October 2020, moved by Councillor Rebel, seconded by Councillor McDonald, whereas the public library offers access to information, and whereas the public library supports personal growth, economic renewal, and quality of life, and whereas we recognize that the Kingston Frontenac Public Library provides a vital service to our communities, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac hereby proclaims the month of October 2020 as Canadian Library Month, and that the week of October 18th to October 24th, 2020 as Ontario Public Library Week in Frontenac County, and further that the residents of Frontenac County be encouraged to use the public library this week and throughout the year.
Discussion on the motion. Is there anyone voting no? Hearing no no's, motion is carried. World Alzheimer's Day, September 21st, 2020.
Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Higgs, whereas September 21 is recognized annually as World Alzheimer's Day, and whereas Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, which is a group of disorders that impairs brain function, and whereas every 65 seconds someone is diagnosed with dementia somewhere in the world, and whereas dementia affects more than 594,000 individuals living in Canada, of whom over 16,000 are under the age of 65, and whereas Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington region has over 4,000 individuals diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or some form of dementia, and whereas the prevalence of dementia in Canada is expected to double by the year 2031, and whereas all community members are impacted, whether they are someone with a diagnosis of dementia, a family member, a caregiver, friend, or neighbor, and whereas the Alzheimer's Society of KFLNA is working to educate our communities about dementia to help reduce the stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis, a disease which causes extreme social isolation, and to make our communities more welcoming and inclusive for people who are diagnosed with dementia and their care partners. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac hereby declares September 21, 2020 World Alzheimer's Day in the County of Frontenac.
Any discussion? Is there anyone voting no to the motion? Hearing no no's, motion's carried. Next, we have a move into the Committee of the Whole.
Moved by Councillor Higgins, seconded by Councillor Doyle, that council adjourn and meet as the committee of the whole, now with the deputy warden in the chair.
Any discussion? Anyone voting no?
Sorry, Madam Warden, Councillor McDonald has his hand raised.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, during your discussion there, you mentioned that the budget deliberations was on October 20th, 21st, or 22nd. If I am informed correctly, I think that's been changed to 27th, 28th, or 29th. I stand to be correct if I'm wrong.
That's what I thought too, but
So no, I had sent an email out to members of council to determine if we could get quorum for those dates. We could not get quorum, so the dates will stay as October 20, 21, and 22.
Okay, let's go back to the motion in front of us, and that is to move into committee of the whole with the deputy warden in the chair. Anyone voting no? Motion's carried. Take it away, Ron.
Okay, we'll go to briefings. Mr. Kelly Pender, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I'll proceed through the administrative report in my usual, hopefully expeditious manner. And if there are any questions on any slide, please ask questions. And if we can't get you the answer, we'll get you the answer as soon as possible. So a number of meetings happening over the past, actually 2 months since we met in July. In particular, I would note the multi-minister meetings as part of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus at AMO, and a big thank you to the AMO staff who put on a virtual conference that I think actually worked on a number of different levels. Still missed the personal face-to-face, but very well done. Also a number of planning issues which have kept the planning staff, Meg and Joe and Jenny, very busy through the summer. Ardoch Lake, Sunbury subdivision, and a number of planning applications throughout the county, but particular emphasis on north and central that seem to be going through a bit of a boom, which is a good thing. We did receive confirmation from the City of Kingston that they have agreed to honor the contract for shared services, for paramedic services and long-term care. There was a number of media outlets, but we thank the City of Kingston for continuing to support our paramedics and our long-term care. And we'll be talking about paramedics with the chief in a little bit about where we see response time going over the next 10 years with the impact of aging population and growth in the west end of the City of Kingston. Ontario Health Teams, we had a meeting a couple of weeks back that both the CAO of Lennox and Addington and myself attended. The health team, the Frontenac and Lennox and Addington health team has received approval to proceed to the final phase of application. The two CAOs and the two wardens met last week and provided to the health team leadership our concerns with respect to governance, which both Brenda Orchard and myself have been advocating beyond the table for discussion over the past year as we've been talking about Ontario health teams. It's clear that health teams will be providing a leadership stake in directing healthcare, and I want to be clear that our support is for patient-centric care. We believe in the model of patient-centric care and have provided that with paramedics and long-term care for a number of years. But our concern rests with the governance model and how the health team will be making funding allocations between Lennox and Addington and the County of Frontenac. We levy about $40 million for direct healthcare needs and paramedics, long-term care, as well as social services such as housing and homelessness programs. And we're unsure of how this will be allocated under a health team model such that it won't affect the amount that we have to levy our citizens. So I'll give you an example that we have used in meetings before. If and when the vaccine has been rolled out and paramedics are obviously well placed to be delivering vaccinations, how will the funding decision be made? And will that be at 100% or the traditional 50% as provided by the province? So we're here to be partners, but we need to understand and be able to explain to this council how funding decisions are going to be made. Looking back to 2011, when the province instituted the aging and home strategy, and I think that's a strategy that everyone around the table supports, and certainly having gone through it with my family, both my in-laws and my parents, I think the aging in place strategy is exactly the right one. But that has dramatically impacted the level of care that we are providing both for paramedics. The call volumes for persons over the age of 60 are well over 50% of our call volume, and in long-term care, where the acuity levels of staff of the residents and the staff required to take care of them have greatly impacted the amount of money that we have to raise through taxation. So that letter was sent last week, and I believe you received a copy in your weekly circulation, and we'll keep you posted as to the status of that. We have offered to host a facilitated meeting to begin the discussions about governance and to try and get a handle on how volunteer boards will interact with elected officials to deliver quality health, patient-centric health care to our residents. Both the Wardens Caucus and the Leadership Council have had a busy couple of months, and I'll highlight the multi-ministers meetings that were held on August the 18th and 19th as part of AMO. We continue to emphasize the importance of internet access, both cellular and expanded broadband, and we will be having a presentation from EORN in the coming weeks. They provided an overview to your CAOs about a month ago, and we intend to bring that as well to a joint council meeting at some point in the future to give you an understanding of where EORN is going with both the cellular project, where the RFP just closed, and on the expanded broadband, which they continue to advocate for our residents. The Eastern Ontario Leadership Council's had a number of meetings, and thank you to Co-Chair Higgins, who has been leading this project. We've been looking at the most significant project, and the one that seems to be gaining a lot of resonating a fair bit with both the province and with our economic development officers, is working with a Kingston firm called Limestone Analytics to look at the effects of COVID. And there's a link in your agenda. If you take a look at that, they've actually used Frontenac as the example. So you can look at the impact of the Frontenac census district by sector. So everything from accommodations to government sectors and everything in between, and see the impact. Now the model is being expanded, and we're actually tomorrow, I believe, meeting with Limestone again to look at the second iteration, because what they're looking at is what things make our region less susceptible to these kinds of shocks in the future, and what things can we be doing to cushion the effects of either a next wave of COVID or the next round of the pandemic. So community resiliency. And interestingly, looking at Eastern Ontario, we generally fared better than the rest of the province, in part for reasons that may not be entirely obvious, but their assumption is, we're looking at the data, we have a large number of family-owned small enterprises that continue to operate. Now, we were heavily impacted in the tourism industry, and that is an important part of our economy, but the small employers did survive fairly well, and we also have a significant healthcare and university sector in Eastern Ontario and in Frontenac in Kingston. So the impact on our economy was slightly less than the province, and that's something we're going to continue to monitor going forward. So as I said, thank you to AMO for all of the work, and certainly, and speaking to Monica Turner and Brian and Meredith, that were part of the key organizing teams. I've expressed that on behalf of Frontenac as well, and certainly appreciate all the work that they did. They're basically inventing a virtual conference on the go, and I think they did an amazing job. So a number of different, and I won't go through all of these line by line, but a number of different things that will be affecting your home municipalities that you may want to take a look at. Also on our communications update, and thank you to Matt Mills, who continues to operate most of our community-based social media channels, and to Allison and Richard, who are operating on most of the economic development channels. Our impressions continue to increase, and has become a way for our local businesses to communicate with their customers and to promote their brand. And Richard and Allison continue to meet regularly with the businesses and to report back. Open Farms has turned digital. So we have 14 participating farms, and they're working on 14 videos, 6 virtual Q&A sessions that they'll be operating via Zoom, and multiple Instagram takeovers. So there'll be lots of pictures, plus an educational content for school groups. So openfarms.ca if you're looking for more information, or follow us on social media. And this is taken a lot of Allison's time over the past month and a half. We can assure you that putting on a virtual Open Farms is just as much work as putting on a real live Open Farms. But we hope that the participating farms will see some benefit, and that people visiting the virtual tours will also get a better understanding of farming activity in Frontenac. Planning department update. 2 major projects are getting near the end of their work. County GIS and planning staff have been working through the consolidated amendments with respect to the Central Frontenac zoning bylaw, and we're wrapping up that work. The Marysville secondary plan, the draft report has been presented, and seeking some more public engagement, and a number of subdivision and condominium activities. And we've held a first meeting of the Communal Services Governance Committee, and a subgroup of that will be meeting with consultants on Friday and looking at what kind of consulting help they will need to bring that matter forward. Planning updates, new planning applications, and our general experience is that for every inquiry, we result in about 3 to 4 different planning applications. So North Frontenac over the past month has been very busy with 4 planning applications, but we continue to receive a lot of inquiries that for the most part we're handling virtually, and certainly anticipate that the numbers for 2020, we're very close to the total numbers for 2019. We're going to be well beyond our 2019 figures through the end of this year. 2 staff updates, and while Tom Mercer was a contract employee with Sodexo, Tom was with us for over 10 years, was our manager of environmental services, and we're really going to miss Tom. He brought not just dedication to the job, but a great sense of humor and a real good team player. He participated on many of our lean projects, and Tom is going to be missed. He's moved on to St. Joseph's Healthcare in London, managing a number of different sites, and we like to think that we gave Tom a lot of really good skills that he'll be taking to London with him, and we've assured him that we will only blame him for 6 months for things that go wrong. So,
Councillor Doyle.
Did you have his email address? I missed that he was going and I.
Yeah, I'll get it to
I
you.
worked closely with Tom on a number of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Send him a note.
Yeah, Tom was a
He
wonderful,
was an excellent.
Yeah.
Person to work.
we shouldn't speak of him in the past tense because he still is alive. But
Well, he's,
no, I'll get you his email address.
thanks, Greg.
At the same time, we're very pleased to welcome Bob Pritchett, who is our new manager of environmental services. He works for Sodexo, but he's been assigned to the site. Tom was previously with Queen's University and he managed all of their off-campus housing. So he's quite experienced in the trades and in operating the facilities. He's new to long-term care, but he's been here about 6 weeks and he is bringing a lot of great ideas and energy to the job. And we welcome Bob to the County of Frontenac and to Civic, our terrific partners in delivering long-term care. So with that, if there are not any questions, I'll turn it back to.
Seeing no questions. Thank you, Mr. Pender. There's no unfinished business, so we will move and recommend the reports from the CAO.
So the first report is the appointment of an area weed inspector for the County of Frontenac, moved by Councillor Higgs, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the corporate services appointment of an area weed inspector for the County of Frontenac report for information. And further, that the clerk be directed to bring forward a bylaw later in the meeting appointing Kelly J. Pender as area weed inspector for the County of Frontenac.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Doyle.
Yes, I've been on county council a long time now, and I must say I didn't even know we had such a position, but then I saw in the report, we can't find any calls we ever had, so I don't think we're going to put too much extra stress on Kelly's time. So I'm in full support.
Any other questions? Councillor Higgins, sorry.
Yes. Yep. I was just wondering, I agree with Dennis. I don't want to put too much work on Kelly and understand we couldn't recruit anybody. But I would like to put a time limit on this just in case anything in the future happens. And as Dennis pointed out, we haven't had, I didn't know, but we had a weed inspector on our staff either. Maybe we should be considering contracting this activity outside based on the very low volume of initiatives or complaints or area weed requirements. So just for consideration going into the future, instead of having a staff position, maybe we should have a contract position.
So through you, Deputy Warden Vanderwall, we did have this contracted out to Mr. Ken Gilpin of the Frontenac Municipal Law Enforcement Agency. Mr. Gilpin retired earlier this year, which left the contract open. Leanne Rutten, who took over the agency, is not able to provide the service. We had checked with a number of other municipalities to see what they were doing as well, because there simply is not the choice out there to find someone. We are required and mandated to do this under the Weed Control Act, and currently I did notify the minister that we at the time did not have anybody appointed. So the appointment of Mr. Pender was meant to be temporary right now, and we are speaking with the Joint Services Review with the townships on an area of bylaw enforcement, which may include weed inspection. So this was meant to be temporary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the only comment I'd make, that's the highest compensated weed inspector I've ever seen though, in my lifetime anyway.
That's only if he has to act, right?
Okay,
Not suggesting we cut his pay.
Right up there with fence viewer.
corporate services on storage management.
Sorry, Deputy Warden Vanderwall, did you call a question on that motion?
I thought it said further point of views. All in favor?
Delay and run screen.
Carried.
corporate services storage and management agreement with Queens.
Moved by Councillor Rebel, seconded by Councillor Martin. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the corporate services storage and management agreement with Queen's University for the archival records of Frontenac County Report for Information, and further that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute a 5-year agreement between the Corporation of the County of Frontenac and Queen's University at Kingston commencing January 1, 2020, with the option to renew for an additional 5 years for the management and storage of the collection of County of Frontenac archival records located at Queen's University, attached as Appendix A to this report.
Questions? Councillor McDonald.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering too, Jeanette, is that given the ability to use less space for the storage of the records, will that mean that we will get charged less because now most of the record keeping, I assume, would be done digitally? Thank you, Madam Board Chair.
So through you, Deputy Warden Vandewaal, the records that are housed at Queen's are historical records. They went there prior to amalgamation. We no longer send records to Queen's. We keep them at house here, but we do have, the contract does allow us additional storage area if it's needed, but there currently are no other records going there.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, all in favor? Carried. Passage of Bill 197.
Moved by Councillor Higgins, seconded by Councillor Doyle. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive for information the corporate services passage of Bill 197 on meeting rules and temporary amendments to procedural bylaw 2013-0020 regarding electronic participation and proxy voting report, and further that County Council extend the electronic participation rules applicable only during a declared emergency currently contained in procedural bylaw 2013-0020 section 9, procedures applicable in a declared emergency for a period of 1 year following the termination of the municipal emergency, and further that County Council review the rules of electronic meetings for County Council and its committees before the expiry of the recommended extensions, and further that County Council take no action on options to consider proxy voting at this time, and further that procedural bylaw 2013-0020 be amended accordingly.
Questions? Councillor Higgins.
Yes, I noticed when reading the report that the county is going to be looking at some technical equipment and possibly software to implement electronic meetings. I just wanted to make a comment that if the county proceeds to do that, that they include the townships so that we can take advantage of some pricing if the townships decide to go that route as well.
I guess one comment I'd like to make then, are we going to go ahead with the electronic purchases, not knowing whether in the next year we're going to actually move forward with the rest of this?
So through you, Deputy Warden, I could speak to that. We're not anticipating any additional electronic purchases currently right now with the hybrid model. We are using a 360 camera, which we've already purchased. It was at a very reasonable price. And it feeds into Zoom, and we are able to live stream. So the only thing I think we might be looking at is the actual cost of what it is to continue with Zoom meetings. But we don't anticipate any additional costs at this time.
Councillor Doyle.
Yeah, is that camera here? I didn't know we had one. Is that?
Right there, it's looking at you in the middle.
Oh, it's that. Oh, thank you. I better behave myself.
We got you. Warden Smith.
I just want to say, I think it's very important for us to have the choice. For example, my situation today is I have a grandson home with a cold. It's probably just a cold, but I didn't want to take the chance of going into the meeting to expose others in case it's not just a cold. And I think for the next couple of years, we're going to need technology more so than ever before.
Okay, no other comments, all in favor? Carried.
Sorry, Ron, you didn't see my hand up before the vote. I just had one other question for Jeanette. In that bill, I thought the bill was related to electronic participation for municipal council meetings going forward, whether it was an emergency or not. And you're referring to this as an emergency for maybe up to a year. Can you comment on that? Because my perception of that bill was different than yours.
Sorry, so what we're actually recommending is that we currently have in our procedural bylaw the option to participate electronically as we are doing today when we are in a declared state of emergency only. So what we are recommending in this report is that those electronic provisions be extended 1 year past the end of the declared emergency, so that once we come out of a declared emergency without this motion, the option for electronic participation disappears. So this motion is recommending that we extend the electronic procedures as permitted now under Bill 197 for 1 year once we end the declared emergency. And that's just, we've done it for 1 year because the bill was passed very quickly and council hasn't really had the time to look at how it wants to move forward with electronic participation. So for example, it may want to put criteria around that. It may want to say that, you know, councillors are only able to participate if they're ill, such as the situation that Warden Smith is facing today, or due to weather. You may want to have criteria around that, so it's a bigger discussion. So what this is allowing us to do is to make sure that we have those electronic participations in place once the county lifts its declared emergency. And then we'll take perhaps a committee of the whole meeting to sit down and discuss how council wants to move forward with this.
That explains it. Thank you very much.
I guess I already asked, but all in favor? Carried. Mr. Pender again on staff briefing. Sorry, and Gail Chevalier.
Thank you, everyone. This is our annual response time standard report, and we're just going to give you a bit of background because a lot has happened with COVID and the two major reports that have been completed with respect to paramedic services over the last few months. As well, we're still in a state of in a holding pattern with regards to the provincial review. We've been assured that it will get back on track, but we don't have any timelines or any further information. So we thought it best to give you a bit of an overview of where we've been and where we think we're going related to response time, which is a mandated report that we have to provide you each year. So with me is Chief Chevalier, who will go through some of the technical aspects, and I will go through some of the more political and regional aspects that I've been involved with. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chief Chevalier.
Thanks, Kelly. So the legislative response time standard was implemented in 2013 as a provincial standard. So each municipality has to report by October 31st of every year what their response time standard is going to be. And then every year by March 31st, we have to report what our results were of the previous year. So what this response time standard is looking at, first part is the ministry mandates us to determine when any person with an AED can arrive at the side of a patient within 6 minutes with their AED. So this is largely out of our control because it can be fire departments, it can our target is 48%, and it's something that we don't actually have control over, but that's approximately the amount of time that we are able to beat that response time. The second part is the one we speak of frequently for CTAS-1 patients, which are the most seriously ill patients. The government mandates that we have to have a paramedic at the side of this patient in 8 minutes or less, and then we determine how often we can achieve that. So our goal has been set at 70% for this CTAS-1 patient. And then for CTAS 2, 3, 4, and 5 patients, we get to set both the target time and the percentage that we commit to meeting that target. So for 2, 3, 4, and 5, we say that we will get there in 10 minutes, 75% of the time. If you look at those targets compared to the rest of the province, this slide is a little different from what you've been looking at. So the orange line is each municipality's target, and then the bar indicates their actual. This is for 2019. So you can see Frontenac's in the green. Probably Councillor Doyle can't see that, but Frontenac has more than achieved their target for CTAS-1 patients. We're in the top third of the province for setting our target. You can't really see, unfortunately, the far right-hand corner. There's a couple of services who have set more lofty targets, but they're not achieving them. And if you also look over on the left-hand side, you can see there's some municipalities that have set very low targets and are overachieving based on the low predictions that they've made. If you look at our targets and our actual response time since 2013, we have continued to meet the targets that Council has set, although you can see a decline in our achievement of those targets over each of the years, up until actually 2019 was a bit of a fell out of the pattern. And the reason we believe that is in 2019, our call volume did not go up as much as it had in the previous 3 years. And as well, it was the final year when we added the extra resource onto the road. So when you combine less calls and more resources, you have a better ability to achieve your response times. Now, hand it back to Kelly.
So as part of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, I was part of the team that looked at the Eastern Ontario context for paramedics. This is part of our submission to the province of Ontario, looking at paramedic service delivery. I've taken out of the report, and you've seen many of these slides before, but I think they're relevant today and be more relevant for next year.
Hold on, I have a question for Chief. Is that when you have those times, does that include or not include volunteer firefighters getting there? Or is this just the emergency response from paramedics that are getting to these calls, other than the critical ones? Or...
So this graph shows how often the target was achieved. So the one that would involve fire is the far left, the sudden cardiac arrest. So we have committed to having a person with an AED at the side of a cardiac arrest within 6 minutes, 48% of the time. And so those numbers would indicate when that was achieved by whether it was a firefighter, a citizen, or whatever. One of the other challenges is we don't always know. For fire departments, it's easy to determine when they've got on scene because we can get those statistics. But what we often can't get is a citizen that arrives at the side, and then we don't get an exact time because normally a citizen who's responding to a cardiac arrest isn't checking their watch to see what time they got there. So basically, we work backwards from when the paramedics arrived. There was a citizen on scene with a defib. How long do they think they've been there? How many interventions have they done, and calculate back that way.
So that's those statistics are for defib, because the other ones that, of course, that I see all the time on my phone are ambulances 15 minutes away. So that's not for anybody critical. Is that my understanding?
That ambulance 15 minutes away applies to any one of those CTAS levels. So the way that the response is set up with the fire department is anytime that an ambulance is going to take longer than 15 minutes, fire is responded as well. So it can be for a sudden cardiac arrest or any of the other CTAS levels.
Thank you.
Question.
Councillor McDonald.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, are there times recorded from the time that the call comes into the call center and then by the time it takes you to get to the incident?
Correct. So there's a whole series of times that are recorded. So there's the time that it comes into the call center. These are recorded from the time that the paramedics are notified that there's a call until they arrive at the side of the patient.
Councillor Martin.
Well, that was essentially my question as well, but I have just a side question. What constitutes a COVID-19 positive response?
COVID-19?
Yeah.
There's a whole list of screening questions which seems to change weekly. So when a patient calls into the dispatch center, the dispatchers have a series of screening questions that they ask the patient. And if they end up positive based on those questions, the paramedics are advised that en route. And then when the paramedics arrive, they in fact have to do their own screening in addition to that to determine if the patient is COVID positive. So I can provide you with the list. It's quite extensive,
No,
but
I
I
just
can't
didn't
name it
know
off the top.
why. Some calls are and some aren't. but it's-
Yeah, there's a list of screening questions, and if the patient meets any of the criteria in the screening, then they're deemed COVID positive probable, which means that when the paramedics go in, they have to be in full PPE just in case that they are COVID positive.
Councillor Doyle.
Yes, Deputy Warden brings up a very good point on the firefighters attending. Is there any report available specific to how those groups respond and just separate from the paramedics, or would that be up to the local township if we want some such report?
Yeah, I imagine your fire department could provide you with a report of the calls that they've responded to and their time frame.
Because I think it's like 70% of volunteer firefighter calls are medical.
Yeah,
Close to it.
maybe more.
Okay, thank you.
So within the East Ontario context, there are 3 recommendations that were endorsed by the Wardens Caucus that have been provided to the provincial committee that's looking after it, led by Jim Pine. Number 1, that the dispatch needs to be fixed. So 68% of calls are dispatched at the highest urgency, but in reality, when the paramedic gets there, only 26% of them meet the requirement. So there have been other regions in the province that have been given special permission for the dispatch centers to be doing extra screenings so that doesn't happen or that the numbers get closer together. But at this point, the dispatch system is run by the province and we don't have control over that. So number 1 recommendation is that we shouldn't be traveling lights and sirens to calls that don't need lights and sirens, and we should be able to prioritize the sickest of the sick so that they get a faster response. Hospital offload delays. So when a paramedic team brings an individual to the hospital, they have to stay with that individual until handover to the hospital. And Kingston is relatively good in that regard, but certainly Ottawa and some of the major trauma centers throughout Ontario have significant offload delays. So a paramedic team sitting in an emergency room waiting for a handover are taking resources off the road. So making that process quicker would mean that we would need less resources to respond to the calls because they're not sitting in the hospital ERs. We also commented on community paramedicine programs, and we are lucky to have received funding for our community paramedicine programs. We also provide community paramedic programs locally in each township through our levy. So this is Eastern Ontario. The report did not include the city of Ottawa, but it gives you a sense of the population served by each of the services. So Kingston and Frontenac, our population is 164,000, which is the largest individual service. Hastings also provides service to Prince Edward County. So it's an integrated service on contract to Prince Edward County. So in terms of what kinds of resources we have to deliver that to our population, we have 174 staff, and the primary care paramedics versus the advanced care paramedics, 57 versus 25, and our part-time count 53 versus 11. So the advanced care paramedic can deliver far more services to the patient than a primary care paramedic, and can also discuss those issues with the doctor at emergent and make different decisions. So we are one of the leaders in terms of advanced care paramedics in Eastern Ontario. Prescott Russell has 32 full-time, we have 25, but there are other regions such as Lanark that only have 3. So we're one of the leaders in advanced care paramedics, which is delivering a level of service to our patients. So in terms of the number of vehicles and the hours, we're at about 77,000 hours on our vehicles, and we do not have a first response unit, which is a one paramedic response unit. In Eastern Ontario, Lanark, Northumberland, Peterborough, Prescott Russell, County of Renfrew, and Cornwall SD&G paramedics do have paramedic response units. So that would get the paramedic to you quicker, generally an advanced care paramedic, but you're still going to wait for delivery from, or you're still going to wait for the arrival of 2 paramedics with a transport vehicle. But that is an option available to us. So this is the demand level in Eastern Ontario call volume from 2014 to 2018. So significant call volume increase, about 4.5% per year throughout Eastern Ontario, and our numbers almost exactly mirror that. So we are meeting average for Eastern Ontario. The report also delved into why this is happening and why the numbers have increased. So in 2011, the province of Ontario implemented the aging in place strategy, as we talked about earlier, which means that people are staying in their home longer, which means that people are calling for paramedics more often. So that broad healthcare policy has impacted us on 2 fronts: paramedics, because we're responding to more people who are at home and oftentimes alone, and secondly, in long-term care, because when they get to Fairmount or Rideau Crest or a long-term care facility, they're sicker and less able to take care of themselves. So demand by services just indicates the total number of the call volume changes and the response time changes. Again, we're right in the middle of the pack in terms of the percent change from 2014 at 19.6. Most are above us, but yeah, it's a couple below us. So our total number of responses, then the unit hour utilization, which is a measure of how busy a paramedic unit is, a paramedic team. So basically we're at 35%, which means that 35% of the time they are spent on task. This does not include off tasks such as paperwork or in hospital waiting for handoff. The target is generally expected to be about 35%. So we're right at that. Having said that, that includes the rural units. In the city, we're well over 40%. So the city units are operating well above the standard. And you can see throughout Eastern Ontario, there's a number, and the one that we generally look at is Peterborough County, which is a good mix of urban and rural in the same kind of landscape. When you move to the southwest, where the lots and concessions are fairly square and fairly flat, your response times can be quicker than having to go around Lowborough Lake or Charlotte Lake or wherever. So response times increase by your geography as well. The offload delay impact, as I said, we are relatively well served in this regard. But what the report has determined is that if the province could eliminate offload delay, that would put 4.83 extra vehicles on the road every 12-hour shift in Eastern Ontario. So in any given 12-hour shift, there are almost 5 vehicles tied up in offload delays throughout Eastern Ontario. And for us, it's about 0.44. So half of one vehicle at any given time is tied up. Having said that, on a busy day, we've seen 5 and 6 vehicles parked at emerge at KGH and vehicles from outside of our jurisdiction as well, so on average. So this is the crux of the problem for most of Eastern Ontario, and in particular for us, is the bars are the people over 60 and their response. So 55% of our call volume is people over the age of 60, and that is the fastest growing demographic in Eastern Ontario and in Kingston Frontenac. So as soon as you get over 90, about 82%, and when you're down into the 60 to 64, you're at 11.9. So this is the paramedic response times, and this is tied back to what the industry is seeing as a result of the aging in place strategy. You can see that the line from 2001 through to 2012-13 was fairly flat. The aging in place strategy kicked in, and the numbers start to increase far more dramatically from 2011, 12, 13. So that provincial policy has affected the number of calls that we receive. They've then they've taken the model and they've run it backwards and said, okay, how accurate would the model be if we ran it backwards? And in fact, it's almost exactly what was predicted. And then so they said, okay, we have confidence moving the model forward. And we're looking at about a 4.3 to 4.5% increase in call volume each year going forward. So we're not increasing at inflation, we're increasing at 2 and 3 times inflation, just because of that bulge in our demographics and the aging population. So with Frontenac paramedics, where do we stand cost-wise? So from 2014 to 2018, we increased about 4.6% per year. Leamington Addington, for example, at the top end was 6.6%. The lowest increase was Kawartha Lakes at 3.3%. So again, we were right in the middle. Hastings Quinte was at 5.4%. So as with just about everything, we were about average. The annual increase for the municipal share, so we separate out the total budget from the municipal share, increased from 4.6 to 4.7. So you can see some counties, let's take Kawartha Lake. So their total budget increased by 3.3%. Their share increased by 6.5%. So it's based upon the programs you deliver and the mix of the grant funding that you get from the province. And just a reminder that the grant funding comes a year, is based upon your prior year. So if we add a resource in 2020, our funding is based upon the actual budget of 2019. So you, in effect, you fund that first year yourself. So looking at financial metrics, the number of responses per capita, the staff ambulance hours per capita, cost per capita, you can see where we stand in Eastern Ontario and the total dollars, incremental cost, and the ambulance cost per hour. So cost per ambulance hour, $249, and across all of Eastern Ontario, $229. So slightly over 5% larger.
Question?
Yeah, sure.
My question is, are these other places where we're comparing ourselves to, do they have paramedicine as part of their program?
I turn over to the chief to give you the exact details, but yes and no.
Okay, I just want, because we're not looking at apples and oranges if we're, if other places don't have them, we do. And
so in our area, Renfrew has a much more robust program than we do. Leamington Addington is just getting into the game, and Hastings is just getting into the game. So okay. We were slightly ahead of the curve, but for the most part, the largest component of our community paramedicine is funded by the province of Ontario. a small portion is funded by the taxpayers, but the largest portion is funded through the province of Ontario, actually through the WIN.
Councillor Doyle.
Yes, Kelly and Gail, thanks very much. Very good presentation. But I'm wondering if we're going to share this with our partner with the city of Kingston. There's some very good information on what we're faced with. And,
We did invite them to this meeting, Mayor Doyle, to see this presentation.
Like today?
Yeah. The,
Maybe they're on the line.
the clerk extended an invitation and, yes.
Okay.
Extended an invitation to the city to come today.
Yes, so the city was extended an invitation to provide input to the budget. What they chose to do, because they've now changed their budget process to make it so that the county shows up as a separate levy on the tax bill, and that any questions citizens may have are now going to be forwarded to the county. The city put the public notice on their website encouraging their citizens to come and watch the meeting today. So the residents of the city of Kingston have been invited to this.
Given that we're not sure if they're here, are we going to give them this detailed package so that they at least know what we're faced with as far as all these numbers go?
So I have been dialoguing with Megan. We currently have 9 people who are watching this video via YouTube, and we could end up with more. It is being recorded, and we can send it to the city or to the press.
Thank you.
It might be worth considering a motion at the end of this to send the presentation report to the.
I'd move that right now if it's appropriate.
Are you done, Mr. Pender?
I think there's
I don't want
a
to cut
couple
you
more
off.
slides, and then I can then turn back to the brains of the organization. So, Chief Chevalier will walk us through the 10-year paramedic human resources and facility master plan, which is how we've translated the Eastern Ontario to our own service to look at those projections as well.
Thanks. So as you may recall, last year we had ORH, that organization from the UK, in to do our 10-year human resources and facilities master plan. So the purpose was to plan for delivery of paramedic services for the next 10-year period from 2019 to 2029. And the approach that they took was to maintain the response time standard that had been set by council. So to look at what we were achieving in 2019 and move that forward through to 2029 and what we would need to do that. So it looked at ways to optimize our resource use and respond in the most effective and efficient way through optimal station locations and paramedic resource requirements. So they did this by looking at the current service profile. They looked at 2 years worth of data, evaluated call volumes, patient demographics, available resources and response times. And then they looked at demand projections. So they looked at the expected population increase. So they were predicting a 0.6% increase in the city and a 0.9% increase in the county over 10 years, with a call volume increase of 45.4% over 10 years, or approximately 3.8% per year. This is a little lower than the Eastern Ontario predicted at 4.3. So it's still a fairly large call volume increase that'll be happening over the next 10 years. And then they have a special program where they can run different models through and provide data, what would happen if you moved your stations, what would happen if you added or moved resources. So their findings were that our stations are generally well located, but we have a limited capacity for additional resources. For example, we now, with our new Woodbine Road station, have a vehicle sitting outside because there's no physical garage to put it in. Our downtown station at Palace Road is packed full. There's no more room for additional vehicles. Their suggestion was that we optimize our resource use by staggering shift times. So the hope was that by staggering shift times, when we don't have as many vehicles trying to book off at the same time or have lunch breaks at the same time, we can minimize meal premiums and shift overruns. We are in the process of implementing this, so we don't have any data yet on its effect. And to consider co-locations with Kingston Fire and Rescue. So we opened our Woodbine Road station attached to the Kingston Fire and Rescue. We are looking at a co-location at Division in Elliott when Kingston Fire and Rescue opens up a new station there at the third crossing, which unfortunately has been delayed, and possibly looking at the location at Gore Road Fire Station in the east end down the road. I had also recommended that we would need additional paramedic resources to offset the demand increase in all of our lower tiers. And with the addition of all of these staff, potentially the purchase of 4 additional vehicles in order to fill these shifts. So this is a summary of the recommendations. So the short-term recommendation was re-rostering our existing resources, which we're in the process of, closing Justice Drive and moving to Woodbine, which has been completed. And they recommended increasing a resource 8 to 20 hours in the city. Now, their initial recommendation was in the downtown at Palace Road, but we've continued to see a more significant increase in the west end. So we would actually be looking at putting that vehicle in the west end. And then down the road, there's more recommendations in the medium term and the long term. So looking at our current situation, we've moved Woodbine Road to be moved there in December 2019. We're working on the staggered shift times. We are in continuing discussions with the City of Kingston regarding our co-locations, but as I indicated, they had planned to open Division and Elliott at the opening of the third crossing, and now that's been postponed, so they're not going to consider starting to build it until the completion of the third crossing. So in the meantime, we may have to find temporary accommodations because we won't be able to build on that location. Another thing we did was we looked at our vehicle replacement schedule and extended out the use of our vehicles, so we won't need to purchase as many in order to keep up with the additional paramedics that we hope to hire over the next few years. We also have to consider the impact of COVID. While there was an initial decrease in call volume early on in the pandemic, the time on task increased as paramedics had to do additional screening and wear additional PPE. So that means that they're on scene taking care of the patients longer. So even though our call volume went down, our UHU did not go down because of the additional time on task. Moving forward to now, our call volumes have returned to normal as compared to they were in the last couple of years. But the extra screening and the PPE still has to apply. So our time on task is taking even longer. So our UHU is increasing again. So ongoing challenges, our call volumes continue to increase and the highest amount is in the West End. When we looked at the last couple of years, in 2018, our call volume increased 9% for the Palace Road station's call volume, but it went up 14% in the West End. And then in 2019, it actually went down a little bit in the city, but it went up another 5% in the West End. So the West End is where our most significant increase in call volume is. We also saw there was a report back in May about our cross-border billing. We saw significant increases in cross-border billing. In fact, it went up 25% in 2019 over 2018. And that happens when we don't have a resource to send the closest vehicle from our neighbors respond, and then we pay. Councilor Doyle?
Is that billings from us to others or billings from others to us?
So there's some of each goes on, but in the overall, how much we had to pay out over and above what we received, it went up 25%. So it was significantly more. We saw a huge jump in our cross-border billing payment, and the majority of the calls are being done by LNA County in that.
Just on a comment on that what it really means in my mind is that if we don't add our own services and vehicles, we're going to pay for them anyway, and probably even pay more if we're relying on our neighbors to provide the services. Is that's correct?
Yes, we're going to pay regardless. The calls are going to get done. We're going to pay for them,
So
and
whether we
instead
had
of do them
another-
ourselves than to have our neighbors do it and pay them for it.
So sometimes adding another shift is the cheapest option because the way the system works, regional or province-wide, we get the call responded to by others who are going to be more expensive if we had it done ourselves. Thank you.
Yes.
Part of that would be also though that if the calls are going up in the West End, that's why it's going to be LNA coming first, right?
Correct.
And
They opened a station in Amherst View, which puts them fairly fairly close. So when our state crews in the west are not there, they're well situated to respond. So they're doing a lot of the responses. And the flip side of that is, you know, all of our neighbors are looking at the number of calls that they do in the city of Kingston or the county, and they're adjusting their deployment plans. For example, our neighbors are now no longer responding to code 3s, which are less critical patients in our area. If we have another truck available anywhere within our organization, or if they're on a 30-minute meal break, just to limit the number of calls that they are doing. So we've taken a look at the numbers that was implemented by most of the services in the fall of last year. So we took a look at the cross-border numbers over the first half of this year, and it was difficult to tell. The call volume overall was lower because of COVID. So the call volume of cross-border billing has also been a bit lower, but doesn't seem to be proportionally changed. So they're still doing a significant number of calls in our area.
Councilor McDonald?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Gil, are the cost of running the ambulance services basically the same no matter who comes in regard to is it cheaper to have Frontenac do it rather than doing it yourself?
We have cross-border agreements with each,
right.
Each individual municipality, and so the numbers are slightly different for each one. It's not a significant difference between paying them and doing them ourselves. So that's some risk. The bigger risk is that when they start changing their deployment plans not to do those calls, now our response times are going to go up because nobody's responding in a timely manner.
Okay.
The city of Kingston continues to plan for increased seniors residents. So I got Kevin to do this map for me. That the blue line in the middle is Sir John A. Macdonald, and all of the red stars are retirement residences in Kingston. So these are not the nursing homes, but the seniors retirement residences. It doesn't, there wasn't any way of officially finding out which apartment buildings are geared to seniors and that both the apartment buildings have mostly seniors in them. These are just retirement residences. So you can see there's a huge bulk of them in the West End. And when I spoke to the planning department, they're in the process of working on 3 more retirement home buildings, and 2 of them are also going to be in the West End. So when we look at the fact that our most call volume is for seniors, and the number of seniors in the West End continues to grow, we're going to continue to see difficulties for keeping up our response time standard in the West End. So just to summarize, you know, when demand increases, we take actions to try to balance it. So working from least expensive up to most expensive, we shift our resources, make sure we're covering the shifts at the time when the calls happen. Increased OT happens when we have shift overruns and meal premiums as well. If we have to bring in extra crews when there's, you know, events like homecoming or things like that. The next thing that happens is we have the cross-border billing. So we start paying our neighbors in order to respond to calls in our municipality. We can look at adjusting our base locations to make sure we're responding from the right spot to get to the patients quickly. And then eventually we need to add resources in order to meet our demand. So it's a balancing act. You want your call volume and your resources to balance so that you're able to maintain your response time standard. But once this call volume starts increasing, you don't have enough resources in order to do that. Some of the reasons for increased call volume that we talked about, you know, developments, particularly if we're looking at seniors buildings in the West End, our overall aging population, offload delays, and more complex calls with PPE and longer on task times. The result is, you know, the rural resources are getting pulled into the city in order to respond to calls. That we have a lot of end of shift overtime because the paramedics aren't able to get back to base at the end of the shift because they're getting another call on their way back. We have legislated meal premium agreement, and so when our crews have not received a meal break in a timely manner, we have to start paying them a time and a half until they get their meal break. We have increased cross-border. Our UHU continues to rise, and we've had instances where paramedics basically time out at the end of their shift. So that we have to book them off the board and there's a resource that's not available, period. So this happened on the weekend on Wolf Island. We had a the crew there works their 8-hour shift and then their 16 hours of standby. But after they did their 8 hours, they did 2 more calls and had basically timed out and had to be booked off. And so there wasn't a crew available on Wolf Island. So you do that and hopefully bring it back into to balance, but the call volume again continues to go up. And the answer is, you know, as ORH has indicated, we're going to need to add resources over the next 10 years in order to meet the demand. And this will allow the rural services to be able to return back up to their areas and cover their decreased reliance on cross-border, less than shift overtime and meal premiums, and improve our UHU. So I think key messages, you know, our goal, council has set a reasonable and RTS standard, and we've been able to achieve it. Our costs and our response time benchmark is the average for Eastern Ontario. The city of Kingston is growing and aging faster than other areas in Eastern Ontario. There's a lot of building for seniors going on, particularly in the West End. We haven't yet fully optimized our stations, so we're looking to add an additional station in the city and division in Elliott, and we're going to need another station in the West End to house the vehicles that will be working out of there. If the increased call demand in the city, if we don't add resources, it means we're going to continue to pay our neighbors to do our calls. We're going to see an increase in premiums and an increase in our response times, both in the city and in rural, because rural is going to come down to cover urban. There's not going to be anybody in the north or on the islands to do the calls. So both ORH and the Warden's Caucus report predicted that we're going to need an additional resource in the 20 to 21 timeframe, and COVID has complicated this even more by increasing the time on task. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Doyle?
Yes, I'd like to move that we provide this presentation to the City of Kingston, Mayor, Council, and CAO so that they understand what we are mutually faced with. And further, I would ask that we be given a delegation at a future Kingston Council meeting to discuss the realities we are faced with.
I would like to just, we have a seconder from Councillor Rebel. But I would like to say, couldn't we have just added to the recommendation and further this report to the City of Kingston? I don't think I want to go to a delegation there when we've asked them every time and they don't want to come here. Why would we want to go there?
So just
we
to
give them
speak.
the olive branch.
So just
I
to
agree
speak-
with that. Send them the
So-
report. If they read it, fine.
So just to speak on process, because we did not have on the public agenda that a motion would be made here, we do need to pass a motion to waive the procedural bylaw to allow this motion on the floor. Or we could take Deputy Warden Vanderwall's suggestion and on the next one, simply amend the motion under clause E to add an additional clause that a copy of the report as well as the presentation under clause D be forwarded to the city.
And then if they want to make or serve notice of motion to do something different, then you could do that at the end of the meeting to do it at the next council meeting, right?
That's correct.
You okay with that?
Yeah, as long as we add it in here
Yep.
under E.
Okay, are you wanting to,
Did you get those words? Jeanette, or did I?
well, if you're going to do invite the city council or go there and do all of that, that needs to be a motion that you serve at the end of the meeting. If you just want to add the line, the amendment to say and forward this report to the city, that can be done.
So I can't add both, Jeanette?
So, if you want to add a motion to make representation to the city, it would fall under motions notice of which has been given, but it would still require a 2/3 vote to waive the procedural bylaw in order to hear it today. Or you could give notice of motion at our next council meeting.
But I can add today that we
Forward the report.
that we
Yes.
forward the report.
So if we want to forward the report, what I would recommend is that we do that under clause E, where we actually see the legislative reports response time standard, where there's actually a motion on the floor to pass a bylaw to receive them or to pass them. And then we can amend that motion to add an additional clause and further that a copy of the report, as well as the Clause D presentation on report time standards and future challenges, and the link to today's YouTube video be forwarded to the City of Kingston for their information. Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, that'll work.
Councillor Higgins?
Deputy Warden. Yeah, I'm just not understanding this, Jeanette, and excuse me. So our procedural bylaw does not allow us to make a motion at a county council meeting after receiving a presentation or report. Is that what you're saying?
So the procedural bylaw requires that all motions being given are given on the public agenda that goes out on Friday. It's a way how we provide public notice. If we want to pass a motion on the fly like this, you can, but you must first waive the procedural bylaw to allow additional information to go on the agenda.
Well, I'm not in favor of delaying, so I'd like to make a motion to waive the procedural bylaw.
I'll second that.
Could I ask Councillor Higgins what we're delaying?
Well, we won't be able to send this out until we make the motion at the next meeting. Why not do it now?
I think
Oh,
the
we
clerk
can?
just told you that we could just amend this recommendation to include that we would forward it to the city. I don't know what else you want.
That's me.
I think the thing we can't.
According to them, you have to do that. You have to do that by motion, don't you? And Jeanette just said we can't do it.
You said it can be added to this motion as an.
This motion would be amended.
Okay, I misunderstood. My apologies.
Friendly.
Sorry, and my apologies. I was referring to adding the motion under Clause D, which is simply indicated to be a staff briefing.
Okay.
Just to further clarify, what we can't add though is a request to present this to the city council. That would require a notice of motion at the end of the meeting.
And I will tell you that I will not be supporting going to the city after what we've been through.
Agreed.
Let's stick with the first part. And
We'll agree with the friendly amendment and forward it to the city. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to read it?
So I take it now that we're moving on to Clause E, which is the 2021 Legislative Response Time Performance Plan. And that's moved by Councillor McDonald and seconded by Councillor Higgins. Resolved that the County of Frontenac receive the Emergency and Transportation Services 2021 Legislative Response Time Performance Plan report for information, and further that Council direct the clerk to introduce a bylaw later in the meeting adopting the report response time standards as outlined in the report. And now we have a motion to amend that. So that's moved by Councillor Doyle and seconded by Councillor Rebel, that the motion be amended to add an additional clause and that a copy of the report, the Clause D presentation on response time standards and future challenges, and the YouTube link to today's meeting be forwarded to the City of Kingston for their information. That's the motion to amend.
All in favor
Of the amendment.
of the amendment?
No, don't, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. No,
Things just go
Ron,
back.
I still had some questions on the presentation. I still had some questions on the presentation before we vote. And I have a question for Gail. Gail, I just wanted to know, the response times are correlated together between rural and urban. Is there any way we can see a report? The urban response times are having an impact on the rural area, but I really can't tell because it's not being presented in that manner.
Yes, the way it was presented is what we're required to present to the ministry, but I can get a report that separates out each municipality and what the response time is.
Okay, thank you.
The only other comment I was going to add is this is just information. All the recommendations are in there, have nothing to do with accepting those. It's just information.
Right.
Okay, so all in favor on the amendment? And then that's carried.
So now you need to call the question on the main motion as amended.
Right, and all in favor on the motion as amended? Carried.
Gail.
Office of the CAO, How Island Ferry.
We're going to break sometime.
Well, I was gonna try to make you go through till when everybody starts having that report, but I don't know, that's a long ways away. But if we stop, it's even longer. Are you doing anything on that, or you talking about it, or are we just gonna go ahead?
I'm sorry, where are we at?
The How Island Ferry return to full capacity, we're just gonna have, and
I think that could be,
Clark read it?
I think that could be a quick one.
Okay.
And
Spend a lot of time.
acting director Kevin is here if there are any particular questions about the mechanics of how that works.
Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Higgs, seconded by Councillor Martin. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, Howe Island Ferry return to full capacity report for information, and further that the Council of the County of Frontenac direct staff to return the Howe Island Ferry from 50% capacity to full capacity by implementing the measures to reduce transmission risks of COVID-19 as set out in the Ship Safety Bulletin entitled Measures to Mitigate the Spread of COVID-19 on Passenger Vessels and Ferries, SSB number 12-2020, published on April 17, 2020 by the Marine Safety Directorate of Transport Canada as amended from time to time or as replaced. And further that staff be authorized to notify the minister in writing of the measures the county is taking prior to implementing them, and keep a copy of the notice on Howe Island Ferry as required under section 6.2 of interim order number 3 respecting passenger vessel restrictions due to the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19.
Any questions? All in favor? We're waiting for Ron. There you go. Carried.
Moved by Councillor Doyle, seconded by Councillor Rebel, whereas the Ontario government, in partnership with the federal government, is delivering on its commitment to provide up to $4 billion in urgently needed one-time assistance to Ontario's 444 municipalities. And whereas in addition to the support for municipalities, the government is providing over $660 million in the first phase of transit funding to the 110 municipalities with transit systems to provide immediate relief for transit pressures such as lower ridership, as well as for new costs due to COVID-19, such as enhanced cleaning and masks for staff. And whereas in the second phase, additional allocations will be provided based on expenses incurred to ensure the funding meets the needs of municipalities. And whereas as part of the Safe Restart Agreement with the federal government, up to $2 billion is being provided to support public transit in Ontario. And whereas Ontario Regulation 191-11, being the Integrated Accessibility Standards regulation, which applies to every designated public sector organization, including municipalities, establishes accessible standards, including transportation, and as such recognizes ferries as a form of public transportation. And whereas many municipalities located along the large bodies of water such as Lake Ontario, including the Township of Frontenac Islands and Loyalist Township, are only accessible by public ferries, which are connecting links to mainland highways and roads and form part of Ontario's road system, making them critical public services. And whereas due to the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions placed on ferry services by Transport Canada, as well as public health guidelines, ferry transit, similar to conventional transit, has experienced reduced ridership, additional costs to cover increased sanitation and requirements for masks for ferry operators, and reduced revenue due to the inability to collect cash fares. Therefore, be it resolved that the County of Frontenac requests that the Ministry of Transportation support the Canadian Ferry Association's request that ferries be considered part of the local transit system and that lost revenue be eligible for reimbursement, and further that a portion of the pandemic federal funds be allocated towards municipal transportation ferry revenue loss resulting from the pandemic.
If anybody asks for that to be read again, I'm leaving. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Planning and Economic Development.
Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Martin, be it resolved that the approved budget of $580,000 be increased by $90,000 using $70,000 from the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program and $20,000 of surplus funds from the KMP Trail operational budget.
Is there any questions or comments? Councillor McDonald?
Yes, you Mr. Chair, is that I just wanted to comment that the project, the KNP going up is exceptionally well done. It's been really highly commented on by the people who are actually using it. I just think that we need to get together in regard to that we will not move forward with putting gates on those because I don't think they'll stay there. So anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Hicks?
I just have one question. What caused the $90,000 increase?
Primarily an increase in aggregate costs, but they've
And this fund that we got money for was the cycling program. We got that a while ago, right? Yeah. Because I remember some municipalities got some of that funding also. Okay, if there's no more questions, all in favor? Carried. Is there any questions on information reports? Then before we go to the reports from council liaison, we'll take 5-minute break. Is that all right?
Thank you. One minute used up.
We just get 1 minute.
Yep, good job. Dennis talked too long, I'm gonna get there first now.
So we can.
We don't have an exact date yet, but we're still. This was a big thing for me. I first wanted to get us back to full capacity. Followed by the return to yeah, I've been working on full fine tuning the last 2 details. We have handouts that were printed. It's more or less for our staff, so questions are being asked. It's a little quick handout. Should print one off. What would be the basically it's a scenario I know shows here's your payment option. We didn't have the age at all, and it links the average the website increase in detail. Probably go. It's hard to explain it all in the little and then it talks about safety issues. So one of the things
I can't give you the exact number, but the average
see is that
5 years.
So,
Stay with you long. Stay with you long. Yes. So the problem with that is there isn't much there now. So
right.
If we went back to that,
Jeanette, I have requested to unmute your microphone on your end. Someone is just going to need to go to the front computer to unmute, please.
Jeepers, got more hats on than. Very good. We're going to call the meeting back to order, and we're going to go into the reports from county liaisons, and we will start with Emergency and Transportation, Councillor Higgs.
Yes, I'm quite pleased to report that I had a phone meeting with Chief Chevalier on September the 10th. As you've already heard, that the Howe Island Ferry is now back to 100% capacity, and a directive from Transport Canada had a requirement that we still have to have masks or face coverings worn at all times when outside of the vehicle. And also, Gail Chevalier said that many new operators have been hired, and we see them on the ferry. We're still, I believe, waiting for a more of a final report from the KPMG consultants regarding the study of management. As we've just heard from through Kevin, the new proposed electronic ferry fee collection system should be in place before the 1st of October, which would eliminate the cash and the counting and the handling of money. So this system is proposed for both of the county ferry and the township ferry. On the paramedic side, Chief Chevalier says that they've been really busy at the Leon Assessment Center. At the numbers that have been tested have been on the increase. And as she already reported, the call volumes are back to normal. And that 11 new part-time paramedics have been recruited and are in service. That completes my report.
Thank you. I do have a question then for the chief through that report is, I did go to the assessment center, and I know that some relatives of mine that work in seniors homes have to be tested every week or every 2 weeks, and paramedics do not test themselves. That's not a requirement, I take it then.
Correct. There's been no mandate that paramedics have to be routinely tested, asymptomatic testing. Although anytime that they develop any symptoms, they do have to go down and be tested, and they have a negative test before they can come back and work.
Which I thought was unusual. The girl that I tested me was a paramedic, and she said, no, I've never done the testing. Well, anyway, okay, long-term care, Councillor Martin.
I haven't had any meetings with Susan since July, so I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Corporate Services, Councillor McDonald.
Yes, we haven't met physically with Alan, but he did send me out some information that he would like the council to be aware of or updated on. And I'll read as follows. Legislative services have focused resources in the past few months on meeting website accessibility requirements under the OADA communication standards. By January 1st, 2021, all internet websites and web content must conform with the WCAG 2 level AA, requiring that all PDF documents be available in an accessible format to meet compliance. The county is working to convert all legal documents or legacy documents on the website to accessibility format, and have purchased a license agreement with Equidoc funded through the Accessibility Reserve to assist with the process. We're hopeful that we will be in compliance for the end of the year and prior to January 2021 deadline. And 2, that the provincial pandemic pay premium wrapped up on August 13th, where employers would pay employees a $4 per hour premium and a $250 monthly lump sum for those who worked over 100 hours over a set 4-week period by the province. The program has now ended, and there was a big effort to make payroll by scheduling staff to meet the requirements of the provincial program, and to ensure that frontline workers who qualified for the premiums were paid on a timely fashion. That would conclude my report at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Planning and Economic Development, Councilor Rebel.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. So in communal services, the first committee meeting was held on August 27th, and that provided a lot of background information for members of the committee. Next meeting on September 23rd, we'll have the consultant president to move that process forward. In terms of budget, the department will be presenting their budget to the advisory committee on October 14th prior to County Council. There is a fair recognition of the high workload within the department, and so they may require an update to the work plan moving forward. The Arctic Lake Plan Condominium, North Frontenac Township Council is now very happy with the plan revisions. The draft plan is to be presented to the Planning Advisory Committee on October 14th. This of note is the first planned subdivision in North Frontenac since their amalgamation. Open Farms, Allison has prepared a virtual open farm website. Scheduled learning sessions during the day would allow schools to get involved in that learning environment as well. For Economic Development Services, there's been a consultant to review the economic development side of the department. The review is expected to be completed by year end, and it's all been funded by the province. Lastly, KP extension to Clarendon is virtually completed. Some minor finishing work to do. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess if anybody has any questions, they just throw up their hand. Reports from external. Oh, sorry, Councilor Martin.
I just had a question for Bill. On the COVID premium that has been paid through this crisis, is that going to be captured somewhere so we can maybe get reimbursed down the road from the province?
It's paid for by the province. We're just the flow through.
Yeah. We're just, okay, it's a direct payment. All right, thank you.
Kingston Frontenac Library Board, Councilor Bell.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. The library meets this afternoon. It will be our first in-person meeting as well. Libraries are now all open. The timing is somewhat phased in depending on the specific facilities. They were certainly trying to meet all of the provincial guidelines, including capacity, which is of particular relevance to the Central Library. Many programs are being provided virtually, so largely back open as much as possible. Thank you.
KFLNA, Councilor Doyle.
Thank you. The public health unit is still very active on various other files such as opioids and providing support to babies and younger children, all that. But I want to make a few comments on the COVID-19. We are actually still in very good shape here with a few cases added here and there. With Queens coming back, we are particularly concerned. 2 weeks ago now, we had one student show up from the US, and luckily with the 14 quarantine rule, they're in quarantine for the first 2 weeks, but a day or two after she arrived, she was confirmed to have COVID-19. So that's a bit of a worry, but not really our biggest worry because of the border closed. We still have a lot of cases in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, and region. I heard a statistic this week that Montreal alone has had 3,500 deaths in Montreal alone. Ontario wide is only at 2,800. So it's those hot spots you have to be particularly careful of. Either visitors coming to you from there or you going there. And so if you have the urge to travel, I would suggest pick some place like Algonquin Park, stay in the wide open and you're safe. But if you must go somewhere and you're going to be indoors closer than 6 feet to others, strongly recommend wearing masks. And one of the reasons we're doing so well in our region is we have all municipalities in support of what public health is doing, and our residents are following through on recommendations, and our staff at public health is excellent in relaying that message and working with the public day in and day out. We've got a very robust testing system in our region and a very quick response to tracing anybody that's got the virus. So the attempt is to get people that have been in contact with anybody that's confirmed with a case isolated as well, so they're not spreading to other people. So this R0 number in our region is below 1, which means you're not reproducing the virus. Across the province is a neighborhood of 1.5, which means it's growing. Every person that gets it gives it to 1.5 people more. So that grows. If it's below 1, it eventually burns out. So that's the whole strategy of all these tracers and inspectors. So I just want to thank everybody for their support, and we do have some good news comparison to where we were 6 months ago. The death rate is down, and we're not clogging up the hospitals in Canada, primarily because of the good working relationship between the provincial governments and the federal governments, and everybody's focused on the common cause, which is to keep this from growing, and we'll get through it. There's some medications now to help patients that are having difficulty, and the medical experts have found out certain things like putting people on their stomach as opposed to their back helps with the survival rate. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. And so I would ask everybody to remain vigilant, and we're hopeful that we will eventually get a vaccine for it. That's my report. Thank you.
Can you tell me where the new testing center is going?
I haven't heard yet. We're trying to get testing centers at Queens, but Gail may have heard. Did you hear, Gail?
Yeah, so the new center is moving to, it's called Beach Grove. It's sort of on the campus where Providence.
We can't hear you.
Beach Grove on the Providence Care campus.
Right, and that's what they said before, but then I've heard all these rumors it's going back to the old rink and all of these things, but
So as of yesterday,
it's still Beach.
Deputy Chief Gowdy has been involved in the plans for the moving, and the plans are all set up with the moving company moving in. So as far as we're concerned, it's moving to Beach Grove.
Beach Grove. Okay, thank you. Warden Smith, housing and homelessness.
Yes. There's been 2 meetings since we met last. The one meeting I got to, the other one I wasn't able to attend. The meeting that I attended, we spent the whole time talking about the encampment and moving people to Artillery Park and different places where they could be housed. There was nothing talked really about housing. It was all homelessness and the crisis of people camping out. The agenda for the meeting that I missed was a continuation of that same topic. So we'll see what the next agenda is like.
Thank you. Food Policy Council, Councillor Higgs.
Yes, our meeting that was scheduled for September the 11th was canceled due to the death of Diane Dowling's husband, Peter. So our meeting was canceled.
Okay. Then we will go to reports from advisory committees of County Council.
So there is a report from the Communal Services Governance Operation Model Review Committee, and the motion is that the report received from the Communal Services Governance Operation Model Review Committee be received and adopted, and that report is be resolved that the Deputy Warden Jim McIntosh, Wayne Robinson, and the Chair form a working group to review the RFP and interview the consultants to make the decision to hire the consultant of their choice, which will be emailed to the additional committee members.
I think I'm on that too.
Yes.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, sorry, I said, did I say warden? I said that the deputy warden,
Yeah.
Jim McIntosh, Wayne Robinson, and the chair
Thank you.
of the committee.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
We can meet Friday now.
We can meet Friday.
Yeah. Return to council?
Moved by Councillor Revel, seconded by Councillor Higgs, that council revert from the committee of the whole council to council.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay, adoptions of the reports of the Committee of Whole Council.
So moved by Councillor Higgins, seconded by Councillor Martin, that the report of the Committee of the Whole Council be adopted and that the necessary actions or bylaws be enacted.
Any discussion? Anyone voting no? Motion's carried. Notice of motion. The
Yes,
UC
Oh, sorry.
creation
Go
of
ahead.
an innovative food hub in Eastern Ontario.
Moved by Councillor Higgs, seconded by Gordon Smith, whereas on April 22nd, 2020, the United Counties of Prescott and Russell announced the creation of an innovative food hub in Eastern Ontario, and whereas in partnership with the private sector, the United Counties of Prescott and Russell will build a federal slaughterhouse with food processing and distribution capacities to meet the needs of regional and national markets. And whereas this $36 million project will create 65 jobs and will be located in one of the United Counties of Prescott and Russell municipalities, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac supports the United Counties of Prescott and Russell and congratulates the municipality on this important innovative project.
Any discussion? Is there anyone voting no to the motion? Motion's carried. Communication or any giving of notice of motion?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay,
I would like to serve a notice of motion that the budget increase that was recommended by a previous council, which is 0.6 to a reserve and something else, and it amounts to about a 2% increase, which has never been met. So I would like to, that this council would revisit that to a realistic number, or you make it very difficult to ever vote for a budget for me. So I would like that there to be revisited to a realistic number, or else it doesn't have to be, but that's what the motion I would like to present to the next council.
okay. Is that a notice of motion or is that a reconsideration of a motion? Jeanette?
I believe, and CAO Pender can speak to this, but I believe that that's in our budget policy. So it would be just a review of the budget policy, but perhaps Mr. Pender could speak to this.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a reconsideration because it's been past the timeline on the approval of budget policy. It would be a motion to revisit the budget policy, and we could bring that policy to the next county council meeting if that's the intent, is to review the policy.
Ron, is that your intent to review the policy?
Well, that works for me because I think it needs to be more realistic.
Okay, so that's what your notice of motion consists of.
If you need a notice of motion to review that, then that's what it would be, then yes.
Okay, Ron Higgins?
Yeah, I just want to know, so Ron's giving notice of motion, but who's actually going to bring a report to council? Is that you, Ron?
Bring the report as in, no, I would think staff.
You're upset with the policy, so I'm assuming you're going to bring to council some recommendations on improvement of the policy. Is that what you're trying to do?
I'm trying to get to a realistic, the number that was presented by a previous council long before most of us got here is the budget policy, and that is 0.6. The CAO can tell me for sure, but it's 0.6 to the capital.
So it's a 10-year commitment to capital sustainability of 0.65 above the budget, and a status quo budget equaling inflation.
Right, and that was put in place, which isn't realistic. So I can never vote for a budget. Very rarely, I think I did once. But I think we need something more realistic because we have a number that can't ever be matched.
I guess we've been in that for 5 years now, so maybe it could be changed. I don't know.
Okay, I think this is a discussion for our next meeting, Ron Higgins. We're discussing.
Yeah,
the
I was just going to say, usually when I give a notice of motion, my personal expectations that I would come back to council with a recommendation for improvement, which is what I was asking Ron. Is he going to come back to next council meeting, or are we just going to have a wide open discussion?
I guess with some leeway here, Warden, I guess I could ask that staff bring a report just to show what the average has been historically compared to what the direction has been. And if it isn't even realistic, why are we using that direction? And we should be revisiting our policy then.
Okay, is that reasonable to do?
So I'm assuming you're going to review that with staff and come back. Sorry, Francis.
No,
my
sounds
internet delay is in play here. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm good.
Okay. So from what I'm gathering, what will happen is staff will come back showing what the increases have been over the past 5 years and what the policy is, and then we'll have a discussion from there. Kelly, is that your understanding?
This is a notice of motion, so that motion will appear on the October agenda, be discussed by this council and voted on. The difficulty is that our budget meeting is the week after that, so there isn't any turnaround time. There are 3 parts to the budget policy. The 0.65, which we have implemented, and I believe this will be year 6 or year 7. The meeting inflation, and we do that on the status quo budget. And then is service delivery changes, which are voted on independently by council. So we have met the budget policy in each year, but it is above the target because of service level enhancements voted on by council. So for example, if the province changes a funding formula, that passes costs along to council that are unavoidable. So it would require changes to the service delivery that council would have to deal with. If we add resources in the city of Kingston to meet the growing demand, that would be above, and that would be the 3rd part of the budget policy, and council would vote on that independently. Prior to the budget policy, those were included and council would vote them out. The changes made under the SDOR in 2014 and the changes implemented under Warden Doyle at the time were that those were to be voted on independently and voted into the budget rather than voted out of the budget. And that's a long way of getting around saying the report will come back and say that we've met the budget policy, but where we've exceeded the overall target is because of either downloading by the province or enhanced service delivery voted on by all of council.
Okay, Warden, then I'm going to withdraw because it sounds way too complicated for starting this in a couple of weeks. My comment, and I've made this as long as I've been here though, and I'm not saying we do it right, but in South Frontenac we give direction of 2% and that's what staff bring, period. And they make it work. And that's way easier. So if we don't want to give direction, that's fine, but then I don't think we should set these targets. So I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, all right. So motion withdrawn, and again, we can have this discussion when we are in our budget talks as well. Is that acceptable to everyone? I don't hear any objections, so let's move on. Okay, communications are all there. There's a ton of them because we didn't meet in the month of August. Is there any other business? Public question period. Does anyone on the call have any questions from the public? If you do, Megan has explained you need to hit the hand up and we'll recognize you.
Madam Chair, there are only members of staff now on the line, no members of the public.
Okay, we've lost them. All right, let's go to bylaws. Jeanette,
Moved by Councillor Rebel, seconded by Councillor McDonald, resolved that leave be given to the mover to introduce bylaws A through F that have been circulated to all members of County Council, and that bylaws A through F be read a first and second time.
any discussion? Is there anyone voting no to the motion? Hearing no no's, motion's carried. And that ends our meeting. Oh, to confirm, sorry, go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Rebel, seconded by Councillor McDonald, resolved that bylaws A through F be read a third time, signed, sealed, and finally passed.
Any discussion on that motion? Anyone voting no? Motion's carried. Is there anything else to come before us today? If not, the meeting is adjourned.
Moved by Councillor Higgs and seconded by Deputy Warden Vanderwall that the meeting hereby adjourn at 12:04 p.m.
All those in favor?
Okay.
Anybody voting no? Motion's carried. We are adjourned.